I'm from. It's the same in Japan, it's the same in China, it's the same here in India, it's the same in the USA, it's the same in Mexico, it's the same in Argentina, it's the same in South Africa, Kenya, Sierra Leone, it's the same in Germany, Italy, France, it's the same everywhere. We are going to discover that. But you would think that the how come would be because that's natural. You know, we think in words and we want to learn, and therefore we write in sentences with one color. That particular system and the system of education that we have all gone through, and people may say that the systems of education in different countries are very different, they are fundamentally the same. Fundamentally, you have a teacher, and then you have students, usually in rows, in seats, listening to the teacher. And the teacher has some kind of board or whatever on which the information is put, or it's in a book, and you, the student, write your notes in blue or black on lines in words. And it doesn't matter whether those words are Mandarin or Australian Aboriginal or Spanish or Hindi, it doesn't matter. They're just words. So fundamentally, the brain is in the same situation. It is sitting, it is listening, it is obeying, it is noting in words on lines with one color. Now that system started when? When did that system of education start? Not time immemorial. Not time immemorial. 200 years ago. And it was the industrial-military complex. And what did the children have to do? What were they being taught? They were being taught to do what they were told to do. Because if they were in the military, which many of them were going to go into the army or the navy, whatever, there was no air force then, so fundamentally army, they had to obey the order. So if the leader said, charge, they weren't supposed to say, well, hold on a minute, I'd like to have a little brainstorm about that. Got some interesting ideas on the way in which we could or could not and should or should not. They had to obey. And the same in the factories, which is where they were going to work. They were laborers. Most people were laborers, physical laborers. So they had to be taught to obey the instruction and do it properly. So that's how it started. And in order to be ordered, one color was a good idea. Now, I went to school in England, and when I was 7, we were ordered, wasn't recommended, we were instructed to use Quink blue-black ink, or else. And if we dared to use blue ink, or black ink, and not blue-black, we would get 6 of the best and 100 lines. I will only use blue-black ink in my notes. I will only use blue-black ink in my notes. Insane. Now let us start to analyze it from the point of view of the brain. Blue is the main color, black the number 2 globally. If you think about it from your brain's point of view, blue is a mono, single, chroma color, a monochroma. To the brain, physically, that is a monotone, a single tone of color. Now, if you combine mono and tone, what word do you get? Monotone. And a monotone is by definition monotonous. And we just mispronounce it. We say monotonous. But it's monotonous is what that means. And if something is really, really monotonous, what word do we use to describe it? And you all knew it. Boring. And if something is really, really boring, what does your brain do? Yeah, switches off, tunes out, shuts down, goes to sleep. So there you have a perfect little thesis that the planet has been teaching its people, its brains, to learn in such a way as to tune them out, switch them off, shut them down, and send them to sleep. And it's working perfectly, isn't it? I mean, you go into school or university libraries anywhere in the world, and what often are as many as half the people doing? Yeah, sleeping. Giant public bedrooms of planet Earth, our libraries. And you watch children in any country coming home from school, and you watch the enthusiastic, loving parents saying, "How was school today, dear?" Boring. Boring. Boring, very boring. And then what do the parents say? No, they don't say why. They say, "No, it wasn't. No, education is very important. It wasn't boring. You're wrong." And the child is totally correct. And governments could save the billions of dollars and pounds that they spend on educational surveys to find out what's wrong with the system by asking the children. And they would get the correct answers just like that. So I was in that system, as your children probably, unfortunately, are today. And I became a very good note-taker. Very neat. I could get 15 words on a line and save paper and get whole pages absolutely filled with my words. I ended up going to university, and in university, my marks were going down. That is obviously disturbing, so I made more notes in order to make sure that my marks started going up again. What do you think happened? The more notes I made, the more my marks went down, which was absurd. You know, here was I making notes for memory and making more and more, and my marks were going down. Didn't make sense. So I got more worried, beginning to lose confidence. I went to the librarian in the university and I said, you know, I'm having trouble. I need a book on how to use my brain. And she said, the medical section's over there. I said, I don't want to take the thing out. I want to learn how to use it. And she said, oh, there are no books on that. And I thought, what? You know, if I go to a shop and I buy a little radio, what do I get with it? A manual. And I go and buy a washing machine or a car, watch, whatever it is, I get a manual. A little packet of pills and I get a manual. But for this, the most important piece of equipment around, no manual. So I decided to start to find out the introduction to the operations manual for my own brain. And I began to self-examine. I already had the evidence that the more notes I made, the more my marks went down, which did not make sense. The notes should have helped my marks go up. I then noticed what I did when I started to panic before exams. The exam was looming, and my instinctive reaction was to kind of scramble through my notes, underlining the key stuff, and then pulling that out and putting it on little memory cards. How many of you, when exams approached, tended to underline and try and find the key stuff in your notes? Keep your hands up, 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 look around. Right? It's a natural brain function. So I ended up with my little memory cards. And then I calculated that the number of words in my memory cards was less than 10% of the volume of my notes. And my memory cards were all I needed to help stimulate my memory of what I'd learned. So I had been wasting 90% of my time noting. And not only that, when I went back through my notes, I couldn't find the key material. It took time to hunt it down, which meant that I was wasting more time. And I had to read them all again, which was wasting another 90% of my time. So the key memory cards became my little savior, and they made things easier. But then I noticed that some of the key words, and they were all key words, but some were key words, some were just key words, and some were key words. So how in my notes, my little cards, did I identify the key words? I made them bigger. So size began to reflect the importance. As time went on, and I'm giving you a kind of 20-year history condensed into 15 minutes here, as time went on, I realized that connections were necessary. The key words weren't isolated, they were connected. And therefore I needed to connect them. So what technique can you use in notes to connect things? Arrows was one. What else? Lines, color. And then I realized color. All my notes had been monotonic, boring, which is why I didn't like them. I mean, most of you in here are parents, but you've been a kid yourself. How many times do you see children running home from school? Running to home from school, rushing in and saying, "Mummy, Daddy, I've got to get to my notes." Basically, what they do is everything they possibly can to avoid getting to their notes, because they are truly boring. No color. So I began to put color in my notes, and I found that really helped. Made them more attractive. I could organize, structure, highlight, etc. And then over time, I began to realize that a picture is worth what? 1,000 words. So why was I writing all these words when I could have images, which would be far more immediate transmission to my brain? And over time, the mind map evolved. The mind map was simply the result of my exploration of the way in which I made notes, the way in which I remembered, the way in which other people made notes. And I noticed that the best students and the great geniuses all had what the teachers were calling messy notes. Look at Leonardo da Vinci, arguably the greatest genius in the last 1,000 years. What were his notes like? Filled with little doodles, scribbles, little images, drawings, lines, connections.